What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Bluebloods official podcast of FCS Football Central on SI. I'm your host, Zach McKinnell, joined by a very special guest today, Stony Brook head coach Billy Cosh, AFCA Coach of the Year last year, and led Stony Brook to one of the biggest turnarounds in all of college football last year. Coach, appreciate you joining the show, man.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely. So, Coach, I want to get into last year, right? I think you and I just said it, probably the best single season turnaround in college football last year. When you look at where the program was day one stepping in to where it was at the end of last season, what was some of the biggest improvements you saw as a program?
Yeah, a lot of things. I think number one was our mindset. I think we changed kind of the way we thought of ourselves. And I think a way to do that is hard work. We worked hard. We challenged guys, improved their fundamentals, their technique, and obviously the thought of the game and the flow of the game and the schematics of the game. So the guys really bought into that. And really our habits changed more importantly. You watch guys, when we practice, guys are finishing, guys are running the football, guys are in good knee bend position. We're taking care of each other. Not much negative talk. It's more positive, more encouraging, but also truthful. You got to tell the truth. And I think the guys bought into that. More importantly, my coach did a great job. Our staff did a great job echoing those messages, and the guys bought into that. So it was a great foundation for year one. But when the standard increases when you win, you got to get better. And that's what we're looking for now in spring practice. That's what we're in right now. And I think the guys are excited for that challenge this year.
I think a lot of people get this misconception, right? Like when you move into a new house, coach, it's staged, it's clean, everything's in the right spot. Head coaching jobs are not the same way. You really don't know what you're walking into. Was there anything that surprised you being a first-time head coach where you walked in the building and was like, okay, we're gonna have to change this, we're gonna have to change this? And did you foresee instant success like you guys found last year?
Yeah, there was a lot of things we had to do. Obviously, they've won before. They had really good teams, and the past couple of years, we wanted to get back on track. And the guys wanted it more importantly. The players wanted it. When I first got the job last year, I met with every player individually. That's the first thing I did is I met with the players, and I wanted to ask them what they wanted to see in the program. And guys wanted accountability, and guys wanted to work and get a little tougher. So that's what I wanted too. So it was kind of aligned. That kind of helps the process there immensely there. And one thing we do, we have a 4-quarter program like everybody does. You have, winter, spring, summer, fall, and we're a process team. Everybody talks about it. We really are a process team. And I want to get better in each quarter. And each quarter we gave goals, 3 goals for each quarter. And if we got them done or we didn't get it done. And guys want to see progress. That's the biggest thing. Like, why are we doing this? To see progress and improve. And when the guys saw that, I kind of gained confidence going into the season, I think. And obviously, you want to carry that over for this year. And now we're trying to enhance those things.
When you just look at the landscape of college football, you see a lot of coaches getting burnout, right, as head coaches. And there was a head coach that famously said, I believe it was Mike Elko, said he would not wish being a first time head coach in this landscape of college football on anybody. You came in, transfer portal, I mean NIL, you have all this going on. How difficult was that transition from you to step into a head coaching role as the second youngest head coach in college football?
Yeah, well, what's good about FCS? It's not as crazy. It's not as crazy as that level. I can only imagine what Coach Elko and all those coaches have to go through. And there's a little bit of purity to this game as far as development. You still want to develop players. The only thing you worry about is if you have a really good player, you might lose them after a couple of years. But one thing I did is I brought everybody back. I said you can come back and play for us. Our job is to develop these guys. They were recruited to come to Stony Brook. Not by me, but from another coach. But our job is to make them better. You don't just give up on guys. But I did tell them that it was going to be tough, and most of the guys stayed. Some guys left, and the guys that stayed found some success. And one thing we did too in May, in that May cycle, we found some players in May. In that May cycle in the portal, we took the right guys. We didn't take 100 transfers. We took about 8 or 9 guys, both offense and defense, and we evaluated them the right way. We got to continue to do those things, take the right players, and so it definitely is crazy, and it's more so. Just the transfer portal, in general, trying to handle that, and educating these guys what's really out there and what you can get. And is it better here? Do you value playing or do you value the logo or whatever it is? And there's certain things you can't change, but getting the right guys is more important than who you evaluate. That's the hardest thing to do, is the evaluation part and who you bring in the program. That guys that want to improve and develop and get a good degree at Stony Brook. That's kind of the things we have here, and I'm really appreciative of being at this place. But it definitely is challenging. It definitely is, and I'm still learning each day. It's like a new day, man. You read your emails and rule change, and you just got to stay afloat. And you got to pay attention, and you got to find answers. You can't just say, "Well, this changed," but it is what it is. You got to find an answer, and that's our job as coaches.
You're only going into your second year, and I ask every coach this because, like you said, there's a new rule change every day, and there's more changes on the horizon with the house settlement and things like that. Do you feel like you have a better grasp on the landscape of college football than last year, or is it just a year by year basis where it's like, man, we just got to adjust on the fly? I don't know if anybody in college football has a firm grasp on what the sport is.
It's year by year, day by day. I think every year is different, and obviously the settlements here in a week or two, so we're preparing for that. But no, I think it's day by day, and I think what you got to have as coaches is contingency plans. What happens if this rule changes, if this happens, what are you going to do? And the 105, things like that. You have to really stay on it, and you got to plan, and you got to think ahead. And sometimes it's hard because you think you can plan ahead, then you get behind. So you just got to, bend your knees, pay attention, and obviously have answers, as staff. And one thing we do as a staff, we break things up in recruiting. Each guy kind of has a role, and this role, just kind of having plans. So as a head coach, you're not getting overwhelmed. You have good assistants. You got to obviously enhance them and improve them. And our guys do a great job of helping me and throughout this navigation of all these things that are happening in college football.
Has your recruiting strategy changed at all? Do you have a certain percentage you're looking for in terms of high school, JUCO transfers, or is it just based on, or because everyone does like a in-house roster evaluation throughout December, right? And see where they're at. Does it just depend on what you guys get from that evaluation at the end of each season is how you'll set the percentage?
I think so. I think it's year by year. I think it's year by year. Who's returning, who's not returning. But we want to do a great job in high school. There's a lot of great high school players out there, and a lot of those guys may get overlooked, or they might take a transfer at a higher level at a G5 or another great FCS program. So we want to do a great job with our high school kids and develop them. And anywhere you whiffed, or you didn't get a good recruit, or didn't develop, or left, or transferred, you patch them. You patch them with a good transfer. And maybe a guy that's a young player might need an older player to learn from a year, and then he's ready year 2 or 3, whatever it is. So we want to be high school centric first. We want to do a great job in high school. There's a lot of great programs around our area: New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. In the CAA league, those are all the best players are usually from. So we got to do a great job with those guys first, evaluating those guys, and anybody that we missed on, or anybody that whatever it was, something happened, you got to take the right transfer. I'm more of a graduate transfer guy. I like guys that are grad guys that have played. I think there's a lot of good Division II players, a lot of good Division III players, and as long as they played and didn't read a scout card, they played and reacted, made in-game adjustments, in-game situational things like that, you're more intrigued with that guy, because they played. I was a scout reader guy, and when you play in the game, it's a lot different. And we took a lot of guys that are D3, D2 guys, or lower FCS guys that want to move up. And once they're here, they're thankful to be here. They're going to get better. They're going to improve. So it's year by year for sure, though.
When you look at the roster going into 2025, were there any positions that stood out to you in terms of you guys needed to raise the floor of that room going into the season?
Yeah, every position you look at, obviously, offensive line, you always want to get better. That market's crazy as it is,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
as and obviously you want to improve your offensive line. You look at your skill guys, things like that at the receiver room. I think another one is, our secondary. We want to improve our secondary. We got a couple corners, couple transfer safeties that have been really, really good for us so far. They were mid-year guys, which is great because they get a winter, spring, summer, and fall they can develop. So those are kind of positions of need that we're looking at right now, and that we evaluated, we took, and it's still evolving now into the May cycle. To make sure. What's great about spring ball is you get better in spring. Some guys become threes, they become twos, they become ones or 1A, 1Bs. And I love spring practice. I think it's great. I know that's something that hopefully it keeps going on, because some guys need to practice, they need to play, and they need to get better. They need time. They need time, and our job is to develop them and make them better. There's been a lot of guys so far in camp that have improved, and guys that were kind of lower on our depths last year now are becoming guys for us. And it's great. You can see that progress.
Looking at just your development as a coach, man, your dad obviously one of the most experienced coaches. I mean, he's coached everywhere at almost every level. How impactful was he on your development as a coach? And just did you know growing up, it's like, man, dad, this is what I'm destined to do here, is just be a football coach.
He tried to talk me out of it, he because of the hours and obviously the things that go on. But we love football. My brother and I both love football, and he never pressed it. Number one, he wasn't that helicopter dad. He wanted me to fail and figure it out, and but I thought his job was great. When I was really young, I thought he had the coolest job in the world. He coaching. He worked at South Carolina. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But as you get older, man, he's working. He's getting after it. And he's worked for some great coaches, and it was cool to see the impact he had on players. The guys that he coached or guys that barely played but still love him. Like a father almost, and they call him about life. Things like that. So that's what intrigued me. A lot. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of knew I wanted to coach when I got into college. I was a backup quarterback, and I was kind of helping the younger quarterbacks out. And I kind of liked it. I brought some value. I thought I had some decent skill there, not on the field, but more so off the field coaching. And I took these opportunities, throughout my career. Kind of was bouncing around different places, moving up, and learned a lot of football. I still am, and I was surrounded by a lot of great coaches when I was young. My dad, but also guys he worked for, but guys that I worked for. In Indiana, I worked for a lot of great coaches there in the Big Ten. At VMI, I worked for Coach Wackenheim, who was a tremendous coach. We turned around that program. He did a great job, and I was a part of that with a great staff and great players. And Richmond with Coach Huseman. Another great coach, done a great job at Richmond. So I was surrounded by good teachers and good coaches. I'm very, very thankful for that. And I want to continue that tradition as a young guy and help these younger coaches around me to make them better as well.
You guys brought in, you speaking of adding grad transfers, two guys, Chris Ellis and Casey Case, both come in as grad guys. This quarterback battle is going to be very competitive. Both guys with experience. Zealous was a starter in the conference that you guys ran in the CAA. What are you looking for from each of these guys to establish themselves as a starter? And is there any chance you guys go with the 2 QB system early in the season till someone separates?
We got to find one. That's the first thing. You got to have one. But both those guys, we're on practice 4 going on now, and both are kind of new in the spring. Both those guys done good things. Both those guys have strengths, and what you want to see is who moves the team the best. When we call it periods. Not scripted. Guys that are reacting to the game. We've done a lot of situational work early, which has been good. Some red zone, low red. We'll get a 2-minute tomorrow, which I'm excited about. So you want to see those things come to fruition. And you also got the summer, which we have OTA practices, across the country, which is obviously great. You can still develop the ball skills, things like that. And you have fall camp. So we're going to work through fall, find the best player, guy that moves the team the best. And also, more importantly, what the players respond to. That's important to me. Like who do the guys play harder for? Who they rally around, you look for all those things. You need time with that. You can't just make a rash decision. You got to take your time in evaluating. And both those guys have great skill sets. Both those guys are great people, and both those guys are unselfish. It's a good room. Tyler did a great job for us last year. TK was a great player from Georgetown, and he came in and had a hell of a year for us. He's really smart, and he really managed the ball well and took care of the ball and put the ball in the right spot. And you want to have that this year, with these two guys. And both these guys are working. Coach Lovin does a great job with our quarterbacks. Coach Davis calls our plays, does a great job developing them. So you got to give them time. And you want to see everything come to fruition with all the situations and things like that as you go throughout this process.
Obviously, you're a quarterback guy. How involved are you behind the scenes with these quarterbacks? I know you got your positional coaches, but do you ever get down there and you feel it coming back to you? Like, we're going to step in here and throw my input in here.
I do. But the one thing I don't want to wreck the ship, because you want to have Lovin. I want Coach Lovin to feel confident. Coach Davis. They obviously are a very open environment. They want me to do it, and I naturally do because that's what I know. I can teach it. I know it at a decent rate, not perfect, but at a decent rate. And but what's cool is being a head coach, I get to coach all positions now. I'm coaching corners on technique. Hearing my dad talk throughout these years, and our specialists, our offensive line. I get to touch every play, be with every player almost, and get involved with their development. I love that. And we have a we have a tape every day, our team meeting called Just Press Play, where we just press play. We learn football and we show good and bad examples. I get to teach other positions, which I like doing, and I'm learning, how to evaluate. Now, the coolest thing too is evaluation, evaluating, different personnel groupings, different players, offense, defense, and kicking game, things we can do. And I like going on the defense side, going to Coach Lewis, our defense coordinator, who does a great job. But, here's some things I would do to attack this. Here's some things I would see. And, I'm kind of giving them perspective as an offensive guy, how to attack and what's going to be your answer, and vice versa with me to him. It's been very healthy. It's been very good. So, but yeah, I love being around the quarterback room. I do. That's kind of what I know, and to an extent. So, but I'm naturally around. But Coach Levin does a great job teaching them.
I mean, you got your first coaching job was a quarterback coach in 2015. Even then, it's changed so much, right? Because even back in the older days of college football, coach, you would develop guys from freshmen, they'd get sophomore, junior, and then by the time they were a late sophomore, early junior year, they'd be ready to be contributors, right? They were
Yeah.
experienced, they've been in the system. In today's age of especially FCS football, that's not the case, right? You don't have 3, 4 years a lot of the times to develop these guys. How hard is it and how big of adjustment is it to get these freshmen ready to play? Because I think freshmen in today's age of college football, especially FCS, are under more pressure than ever before to be immediate starters because now they're getting compared to what a senior would be. How hard is that as a coach and as a staff?
Hard, really hard. And we play freshmen. We did last year. We played a lot of guys that were early players, and if they're good enough, play them. That's my humble opinion. But it's hard. It really is, because they don't see the growth sometimes. They might be on a different trajectory than Johnny or Jimmy. It's their buddy. Johnny and Jimmy are playing. I'm just as good as Johnny and Jimmy, but I play a position where a senior's ahead of me who's a really good player. It's hard, but you got to. I think the biggest thing is the communication piece. You can't just, if there are two, or you got to obviously stay with them and let them know there's progress, and give them the big picture. Give them the big picture consistently between the coaches, myself, everybody of that player. And as long as you're telling them the truth of where they're at, they'll go. And there's some things you just can't control. If a guy wants to go because for whatever reason you can't beat it, then it is what it is. But it's hard, though. It's very hard, because some guys get impatient. They get very impatient, and they want to see results right away. And some guys are patient, and you're proud of that, because they're finding ways to improve and get better, and they get their time, they're ready to go. You know what I mean? So it's definitely challenging. It definitely is challenging, but I think the communication piece is the most important thing with those guys. You got to communicate and tell them where they are.
Obviously, last year, Roland had kind of a breakout year running back because I think when people look at your trajectory as a coach, right, they think Billy Cosh, passing attack. You saw what you were conducting over at VMI. Does that change year to year? And how are you able to kind of fit your offense around the playmakers, right? Because maybe next year you don't have a Roland and you got to pass a little bit more.
Yeah.
How is that year to year in terms of the evolution of the offense, fitting the talent? Because I think you see across the country, sometimes you have a really good offensive scheme, you just don't have the guys to execute it, and some coaches aren't able to adjust. How
Yeah.
hard is that as an offensive guy?
Hard, but I think the biggest thing is the flow of your team as a head coach. How are you going to win each game? What is the identity of your team? Do you have to keep your defense off the field, or do you have to throw it, rip it and rip it and score points? There's so many factors. I think last year, I felt like we could run the ball, keep our defense off the field. So I thought our defense was pretty good, and we could control the line of scrimmage, run the ball, and I think each year, you got an identity of your team, what you're going to be, you know what I mean? And, like you said, at VMI, we were throwing it. And because we were a little bit lighter up front in the O-line, it's a military school, so guys couldn't gain weight, so we knew we had to, throw it, shred it, do different things that way to score. And then, Richmond, we were a little more balanced, run pass, a little more pass heavy, but it was still a controlled passing game where it kept our defense off the field. Western Michigan, we ran the ball more because we had good backs and we had a really good offensive line. And then here with Roland, he's your best player. Give him the football, and in different ways, though, whether it's in between the tackles or on the perimeter with screens and throws. So, but one thing that's definite in college football and offense, you always got 5 linemen and a quarterback. It's 6 players, and then the rest of your 5 is like basketball. Finding your best 5. Finding your best 5 and 12 personnel, 11, 10, whatever it is. And I think for us, we're just trying to find our best 5, between our personnel groupings. And I think what matters the most is winning the game, not the stats, not the yards, not the completion percent. It's winning. And how do you win? There's games last year where it was high scoring. There's games that was low scoring. And I told her offense, because really your offense coordinator really dictates the game as far as the amount of snaps, the flow of the game. So I always tell AD, like, man, we're kicking butt on defense right now. Let's keep them off the field. Let's run the football. Let's run the ball. Let's get first downs. Let's maintain it. Or, hey, we got to score here. We got to roll. Like, I think that's the conversations we have as coaches. And each week, every Monday, we meet as a staff. We talk about the plan to win the game. How it's going to be, because the opponent you're playing matters too. Like, they're a really good defensive outfit. We got to, maximize our possessions, or, vice versa. Their offense can score. We got to score with it, or keep them off the field, So there's really a flow of the game that you talk about as a staff, how to win it each week. And then really at the end of the day, it's about players. It ain't about the plays. It's about the players. And it's players, formations, plays. I think a lot of people have talked about that, and we believe in that. It's a player's game, and Roland's one of our best players, and we try to give him the ball in different ways because he's a tough kid, and he can catch the ball in the backfield for us, which is a huge plus.
I think for a lot of people, I guess in the national media, right? I think the biggest cheat code to preseason predictions are find the teams that lost or won close games, and those are usually the teams that are due for either a breakout or a regression, right? You guys at the end of the year sitting at 8-2, a 1 point loss, and then a close loss to, I believe it was Monmouth in the last week. How big was that for you guys as a staff and as a team? It obviously you wanted to win the game, but those are really good learning experiences building in year two. How many learning experiences came from that, and has that kind of catapulted y'all to have a potential breakout year and make the FCS playoffs in 2025?
It's definitely motivated us. It's definitely motivated us. New Hampshire game was tough. They did a great job coming back. We were up and we lost the game in the fourth quarter. And Monmouth, we lost. They did a great job offensively scoring, and we couldn't score with them. And really, it's 75 minutes away being a 10-win team. It's the fourth quarter of New Hampshire, which is 15 minutes, and then the Monmouth game's obviously 60 minutes. So you're 75 minutes away, of being a 10-win team. And that's the motivation we have right now, is that. And obviously you want to win them. Like I want to win those so bad for our players. We didn't get that done. And that's motivating us right now, to get better and improve. And there's so many minute little things that we learned from, when New Hampshire had the momentum coming back, how we gain it back. They came back, we had the momentum, we lost it, how we get it back. Now we're trying to train that in practice. Same thing with Monmouth, same game, same kind of premise there. They had the momentum. So how do you regain the momentum? We're trying to train that in practice with our practice habits and the structure of practice, to teach them that, you get that moment, you can't get you twice, you can't get you twice. And we got to learn from those things. And it's motivating more than anything. Our guys have heard it a lot. And obviously we're looking forward to this season to improve and get better, but it still matters about spring ball right now. We're trying to have a great spring and develop these young guys and make them better.
You've been around the CAA for a while. Obviously, you were at Richmond, but before Stony Brook, you hear a lot of national media talk about the downfall of the CAA and how it's not as tough as it used to be, and losing Richmond and losing James Madison and Delaware. Those are big losses, really good teams, but teams like yourself, I think Townsend's kind of starting to trend upward again. You had William and Mary under Mike London reemerge. You still got Villanova. Do you think the downfall of the CAA is a bit overplayed? And just speak to the competitiveness week in and week out in this conference.
It's still a great league. It's still great. Now Richmond was a great outfit. JMU was a hell of an outfit too, as well, and obviously Delaware. I mean, those are obviously, but we still got a lot of great teams. You mentioned New Hampshire's always been good with Coach Mack. They've been good. Coach Santos done a great job. Albany's always tough. You bring in Hampton, who's got great players. North Carolina T's had great players. Have NFL players. Campbell's always had great talent. Elon's always been good. They've always had good defenses. They've been really physical. And there's a lot of teams I'm missing, but there's a lot of great football still. A lot of great football in this league. It's competitive as hell. I was in the MAC, and the MAC was very similar. Anybody could be beat. On a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, obviously back in the MAC action. But with the CAA, it's very similar. Any Saturday, you have to bring it. It's a well-coached outfit, well-coached league, great players. So it's still a hell of a league. It's still a great league. And Joey, our commissioner, does a great job, running this league. He does a great job and really gives us a lot of confidence as coaches. So I really love this league. That's why I came back to the CAA, because I love this league, because it's a really well-coached league and really good players. So I still think it's a very good league. Very good league.
Last two questions, Coach. I know you got to run. The first one is, my co-host is the assistant head coach down at Alcorn State, and he talks about the difficulty. You mentioned the FCS not having as much NIL, right? And maybe these kids went to high school with a kid who's at Florida, right? And they're talking about what they're making. Coach, how difficult are those conversations to have after the season when a kid comes to you and is like, Coach, I want to be here, but I need some NIL. How does Stony Brook approach NIL conversations in the off season?
You tell them the truth of what you have. I think the kids are aware of what it is. You know what I mean? But again, like that's just something that it's evolving each day. And we handle it in house here. And again, it's getting a degree. I think that's very important still. You still got to get a degree. You still got to play, and you got to put on good tape. But we lost Rashawn Lawrence this year to Minnesota, and Rashawn had a hell of a year for us. Was a really good defensive lineman for us, and had a great opportunity. Graduated, did everything right. You know what I mean? My theory is, if a kid graduates, I'm good. I understand. He got his due diligence was to get the degree, and he did that. The ones that transfer before the graduation, that's the hardest one. That's hard because they didn't fill the requirement here. So it's hard. It's day by day. But again, like we still think that degree is very important here at Stony Brook, and we try to obviously elevate that with our guys.
Last year, Coach, you checked off, like, I guess if you had a checklist of achievements you want to do as a head coach, first top 25 win in a long time at Stony Brook. You win a Coach of the Year award. You should have been a finalist for the Eddie Robinson Award. I'm a voter for it. I stated my thoughts on the show about it. You achieved a lot your first year. What would it mean to you, and how important is it to take that next step, make the playoffs, compete for a CAA championship? And do you feel like this program's in prime position to capitalize on the momentum you guys created last year?
That's just the motivation for next year. It's like all those things are great, but we didn't get it done as a team. We didn't get in the playoffs. We didn't make a run. And we have to do that this year. I think our guys understand that. And we're all about the process of getting better. Spring practice, then the summer to fall camp, and it's day by day. And we got a great schedule this year. We got a really competitive schedule. But more importantly, I just want to see us keep growing here. In spring practice, I want to see some guys develop, get a little bit better, create more depth. As at this level, it's all about depth. You got to have depth, and you got to make sure guys can play winning football for you, not just a body, but they can play winning football. So obviously, I'm very, very thankful for last year, but it's last year. It don't matter. It's the standard's going to increase when you win, and we know that, and we got to get better. We got to get a lot better, and a lot of guys are coming after us. So we got to improve this year, and it really starts now with spring practice. And it's been going good so far, but we got to keep making strides as we continue through spring practice.
Coach, I can't thank you enough. I know how busy this time is, right? With the portal window coming, you guys are in spring practice. So just for you to give me a little bit of your time, I've really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, I get to catch you at CAA Media Day, and I'm based in Southern Alabama, so Stony Brook's a bit of a hike for me, but
Yeah.
hopefully getting up there for a game very, very soon. Any last words, Coach? Anything you want to say to the Stony Brook fans out there?
No, just obviously, I appreciate everybody here. It's been a very welcoming place for my wife and my family. We really love Long Island, New York. The people have been great. I just love our players. More importantly, we got great kids here. We really do, and we do it for them. We don't have a job unless they go to school and play football. And at the end of the day, I think this profession is all about the players, and it always will be, and it should be. If it starts getting away from that, then we got problems. But I'm just very thankful for the people around us here. We got a great community here at Stony Brook.
Coach, thank you so much. Guys, make sure to go follow Coach Kosh on all social media. Make sure to follow the Stony Brook football account on Twitter and all social media, man. One of the most active accounts on social media. That's a huge thing in the FCS, getting that brand recognition out there. But for Coach Billy Cosh, for myself, for the Bluebloods FCS Football Central on SI, we are out for right now.